G'day friends and fans. Welcome to Dave Talks Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 18th of October 2025. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, Power Games, Into the Osmound, and The Erotic Tales from the Empire. Part 1 out now, Part 2 coming soon. I have it in editing. Before I begin, I'd like to thank all those who help support the channel. You can support the channel through the links in my link tree. Now, one of the problems, and I think many of you may know this already, but you have Zelenskyy saying that Ukraine's only lost 50,000. Have they lost 500,000? That depends, because the numbers keep changing. Now, it does depend when the question was asked, but US officials have said the death toll is staggering. It's definitely surpassed 500,000. According to a leak in Russian, they say it was Russian hackers. I don't know if they're Russian hackers or not. But European news has Ukraine losing 1.7 million soldiers since the start. Zelenskyy refutes and constantly refutes any claims about Ukraine casualties. Yet we have seen mass funerals. We've seen daily the body bags pile in warehouses across Ukraine, to only see those claiming that they don't exist. And then, of course, the stories are hard to come by, but there are stories out there that these are just a fraction, that most bodies go into mass graves. There was a mass grave recently uncovered, and then the Ukrainians said, oh, look at the Russians, they killed all these people. And actually, the mass grave turned out, the guy in charge of the grave was a Ukrainian who said for years they've been burying bodies from both sides. Now, of course, Kupiansk has all but fallen, but just in that area alone, thousands in Kupiansk, thousands have died on both sides. And as admitted by the gravekeeper in Kupiansk, most of them are Ukrainians. We saw a body swap recently, 1,100 Ukrainians, and all Ukraine had was 97 Russians. Again, everybody seems to have wild amounts, depending when the story's written, but they all go up and down by varying amounts. Russia isn't the only one. We had Trump saying the casualties surpassed 1 million. But we have the BBC, everybody talking about Russian losses, and they're always adding adjectives. You know it's propaganda. You may not recognize it immediately. Ukraine has reported the loss of 1,200 tanks and about 500 aircraft. The numbers, however, are far more than that. There are reports indicating that in June 25 alone, 1,203 tanks were lost. Other reports show that in all, over 5,000 tanks in total. Remember, Ukraine started this war. Russia and Ukraine had a lot of tanks, okay? And at the start of the war, both sides did lose hundreds in tank battles. But how many tank battles have you seen since then? Most of it's been artillery. Most tanks are not engaged in, they don't race up and try overwhelm is what I'm looking for, yes. Neither side is trying to overwhelm the other. Okay, Ukraine can't do it, and Russia knows that that leads to high casualties. But look at the propaganda that they constantly pump out. Ukraine has destroyed 3,000 tanks in the last year, according to reports. 9,000 armoured vehicles, 13,000 artillery systems. You know that's more than Russia had, right? It's ridiculous. Now, some in mid-2024 put around 20% of Ukraine's stockpiles lost within. That would be within the year. That seems to make more sense. But Russia losing over 14,000 vehicles when they didn't have that many. Let's see. Now let's just see. Let's just make sure we're getting the right terminology here. MBTs. Russia is well documented on the size of its military. Look at that! 2,000 to 3,000 tanks. In storage, 70,000. Depletion? Yeah. But even then they say, their stocks have been depleted and they can't keep up. Russia has increased its production from 100 a year to 380 a year, although some say it's as high as 300. I think that's a mixture of vehicles from various factories, but say 380 of them would be main battle tanks. But 14,000? That's more than they had. So there's no way. Likely, while figures like 70,000 were cited, the actual approximation. So even if they were severely depleted, that's still more than they had. So you can't go off these figures. You can't. And remember, AI is only going off the figures it has access to. So yes, AI is going to tell you, yes, their stockpiles are severely depleted because they had 70,000 and now they're only reporting 3,000. Yet actually, if you look at the JADES and the Institute of War Reports, Russian stockpiles are around 3,000 to 5,000. And again, they've lost over 1 million troops. Russian army was about 1 million. You telling me all that disappeared and nobody noticed? Their bases would be empty. They wouldn't be operational. I know so many times the left says, we're critical thinking. For once, they're actually right. But don't critically think by going off what the left tell you. Remember, the Ukraine war is a lie based on a lie in order to and was a provocation to force Russia, after years of sitting on the sideline, to go into Ukraine, after years of trying to get UN intervention to get peace in Ukraine, when Europe was constantly funding war in Ukraine while claiming they're working on peace efforts. Again, you cannot work both sides of the fence. We saw this in Vietnam, we saw this in Korea. How many failures around the world are because you work both sides of the fence? You work the war and the peace efforts. You can't do both. This carrot and stick approach to war, this liberal approach to war, is turning the world against you. Now, yes, the world is economically crumbling, mostly because billions of dollars are being spent on war, and that means the rest of the economy suffers because of it. Recently, Money in Economics came out with the leaked economics report that showed Russia's economic growth was higher than the World Bank report, and the World Bank report was prepared by a Ukrainian. So what is this obsession that people have with Ukraine? And why do they keep giving Ukrainians high positions? It's obvious that it's because the Ukraine is the agenda. Ukraine is their experiment. And once they've finished experimenting with Ukraine, they will drop it like a hot potato and start systematically destroying more countries. Because remember, folks, the agenda is to destroy nations, nationality, languages, and religions until there is only one. It's because of this Unitarian approach to everything by liberals. Now, this is rare for an admission that Ukraine killed civilians. But don't worry, they're only Russians, you know. That's the way this story reads. There's no outrage. There's no outrage. It's just said as a matter of fact. But then again, here we have Zelenskyy and his meeting in Washington. Oh. Zelenskyy told reporters that he was optimistic about ending the war. This is the chance if flexibility is shown, Trump told reporters. So remember, he didn't say flexibility by Putin. He said flexibility. Zelenskyy congratulated Trump, claiming that Putin's not ready and confident with Trump's help, we'll stop this war. And we really need it. So Ukraine is desperate. Ukraine isn't winning. Ukraine's on their knees begging the American to get us a ceasefire now, i.e., which just happens to coincide with the delivery of more arms from Europe. Of course, why don't they want a ceasefire now before the arms arrive from Europe? Because they know Russia will attack it, and they're hoping that if there's a ceasefire, then they can claim that Russia broke it, like they've done 8 times in the past, allegedly. Every time it just happens to be Ukraine renews the war because Russia broke the peace agreement. And yet the whole world, because you look at how skewed the media is towards Ukraine. Actually, is there a favorability rating? Hell. That's it. Objectivity. Well, Ukraine has banned TV channels for so-called Russia propaganda confronting members. Western media is biased as ever. Western decline media bias. Varying degrees, propagandizing, spreading disinformation, waging war of disinformation. So Wikipedia admits there's a disinformation war. Western media all have, to varying degrees, been accused. See, Russian channels claim that there was shelling. They're trying to here's Wikipedia, with help of The Guardian, trying to make you think the Donbass war never happened. Or didn't happen the way you saw it on TV. what little of it you saw. News presented as actual events as hearsay, anonymous blogs, intentionally staged videos, and then, of course, accusations of Russophobia. But all of these have been verified that the media is engaged in a campaign to depict the Ukraine government as legitimate and hide the fact that they're fascist, while claiming that that's just Russian disinformation. Well, Russia is actually quoting sources from The Guardian, which doesn't help the Russian case that The Guardian's full of lies and misinformation. See, that's the problem. Every side does this, right? They did this throughout World War II. They lied constantly about Hitler, presenting, which you didn't need to do. But they just can't help themselves. It's all part of the... See, liberals have forever just lie and smear about people all the time. And then cry when you call them out on it that you're just a programmed robot of the other side, you know, or you're just a Putin puppet if you don't believe our lies. Oh, that black man didn't... That's not... That black man's just a victim of poor circumstances. If you say otherwise, that's just racism. Yeah, but millions of people are victims of poor circumstances and they don't go out and murder a child for being white and then claim that they have diminished circumstances. Diminished capacity, because of poor circumstances. See, lawyers have created an argumentative system that is so hostile to the truth that the truth is not required in court. It is just how much you can convince the jury that my client needs sympathy. And that is the case we have in the case of Ukraine. Liberals are not arguing Ukraine is innocent. No. But they're also doing the same thing they did in Vietnam. Oh, we just need another few weeks. Or we just need another weapon. Or we just need... we'll get back to you. And eventually, when the Republicans won the election and LBJ had to sit down with Nixon, he said, things are worse than you thought. We're not going to win this. And left. But the reality was that it itself was a lie and propaganda. Nixon didn't believe him and asked around, and people said, sure, we've got this in the bag. Sure, we've got this in the bag. So, again, Nixon didn't know what to believe, and still today, people don't know what to believe. Okay? I've been to that country. I've met people who fought in the war, and they all too thought that America was going to win until America pulled out. Even the North was prepared for a loss. The North was prepared for a massive bombing campaign that never happened. Sure, you read about it, but it turned out they did this, and they do this they did this in Korea, they did this in Vietnam. Heck, they did it in World War II. They reported bombing raids that never happened, and they've done this in Ukraine as well. So you never know what's truth. You never know what's a lie. The media still today hasn't covered a gas plant in Ukraine completely wiped off the map. And again today, another facility was wiped off the map in a Russian missile strike. Again, the Western media doesn't cover it. There's nothing here about it as well. And again, they always talk about Russian aggression. If you have to say that every time, it's like asking a man, so when did you stop beating your wife? I never. Oh, so you never stopped beating your wife, the lawyer would inject. Keir Starmer. Unwavering commitment. We've heard that before. This is the problem, all the way with LBJ, all over again. Now, there are many undersea tunnel. Don't dismiss that. Elon Musk Boring Company may sound boring, but this boring company may transform mining and minerals and do away with open cut mining. Be a better, build better tunnels than previously in the past. And as shown by the Eurolink, is it called Eurolink? The Trans-Channel Tunnel, whatever they call it now. That significant rise in trade. All right. It raises the level of trust and significant rise in trade. But Zelenskyy will be in touch and all this other things. You know, Zelensky's like Jared Leto, okay? Or Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, or Ocasio-Cortez, I think, properly. AOC, Bernie, Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris. You know how they always try to make somebody a thing, right? Whether it's Jared Leto, Kamala Harris, AOC, they all did the same thing. Constant media repetition. Zoran, every day in the media. Constant repetition. That is when you know they are trying to brainwash you, okay? Polish court blocked another extradition attempt of the diver who's allegedly behind the Nord Stream gas pipeline explosion. Sooner or later, you know, we have a meeting with Vladimir Zelenskyy and Trump. Trump put out a statement. Meeting with the president of Ukraine was interesting, cordial, but I told him, strongly suggested to Putin, it's time to stop the killing and make a deal. Enough blood has been shared with the property lines being defined by the war and guts. They should stop where they are. Let both claim victory. Let history decide. No more shooting. No more death. No more vast and unsustainable sums of money spent. This is a war that could have never started if I was president. Thousands of people being slaughtered each and every week. That is a fact. No more. Go home to your families in peace. You think Zelenskyy will take that to heart? He didn't. Now today, there's misplaced markers. That marker says, explosion in Zaporozhye. Zaporozhye is over here. See, two markers with the same. But the average person ain't going to read all these markers. They're just going to say, oh, look, Russia attacked Romania. Even if they knew it was Romania, how many people would know it was Romania and not think Romania was just that little dot on the map over there and that it was named Budapest? You know, this is the problem in the world, right? Alright, so fighting in the northern buffer zone, explosions in Sumy, the usual run-of-the-mill, nothing has changed. The same with Kharkiv and the other buffer zone. No changes to the buffer zone. The fighting has progressed to the past the junction in Kupiansk, yet the map hasn't updated. That's typical propaganda, right? Though nobody's certain exactly whether that was assault forces, which is likely, or Russians have established a foothold. Now, Russians have resumed aggression in multiple parts, so they haven't completely abandoned the idea that they are going to go over these towns and cut them off. I guess that what I'm trying to say is they're probing. They haven't given up on the idea of cutting off. Because if they cut off the Zelenskyy line and do so successfully, that collapses all of this within a month or two. But this itself could take longer than a direct assault. And you say, why do that? And I says, well, because Ukraine can bring in extra troops to this front line here and hold Russia, and the resources up here be put into this line here. So you have basically the bulk of the Ukraine army bogging the Russians down at the risk, of course, because remember, right now, the bulk of the Ukraine army, the bulk of Ukrainian manpower is being kept on internal security. They risk, of course, mass casualties, which is probably why both sides won't do it. So Russia will probe, seeing how far they can get quickly without incident, and then start setting up lines of defense, expecting the Ukrainian pushback. Also allowing their men to rest, which is important in war, believe it or not, because the amount of stress doubles, I think, the fatigue level of a normal person. So you can imagine that the high stress of combat will cause fatigue twice as fast. So they're not going to push like they did in Chechnya, because even that was a toll. So we don't have any major push in the north. We have only probing attacks again, though they are close to Konsk. They still haven't pushed. They've only done probing attacks again. Nothing significant here. So, again, nothing significant here. Looks like when Russia put resources into capturing here, they lost territory here, and they've been able to regain some of the lost territory here. They've been able to advance into Pavlovsk. So Russia's made a significant advance into Pavlovsk. So they renewed offensives in Rodiny and probing attacks into Myriad. Now it looks like the Russians have been able to this time gain a foothold in Pokrovsk along the main road through the town and several blocks, which is significant. But again, we'll see what happens over the next 24 hours, because Russia has gone into Pavlovsk before and lost, just like they went into Roddy, were able to hold it for a few weeks and lost, which is, again, why I think Ukraine thinks, oh, look, the Russian army is tiring. So Putin is going to take things cautiously, of course, but he's always been cautious. Ever since the first Chechen War and the failures there, he has been way more cautious. Now, it looks like Ukraine is fiddling the figures here over this territory, but It is possible that Russia has withdrawn and has only engaged Ukrainian troops occasionally in this area, and that this all might be just to pin Ukrainian troops down while they deal with the Ukrainian troops sent in to reinforce this area. No one would put it past Ukraine to diddle the maps to make it look like they're doing better than they are. I did this with Chavis Yar. And there's also a strange lull on most of the front. So this war might be actually in the phase of troop transfers, which you'll see some areas, so you'll only see fighting in some areas. Now, one advantage of knowing Ukrainian troop rotations is that Russia can carry out its own between its three lines without fear. Ukraine is going to come in because Ukraine is doing its troop rotations, and Ukraine is also betting that Russia is going to do its troop rotations. So they fight. Both sides will fight to near exhaustion and then rotate their most exhausted troops out. But occasionally, a lot of these conflicts here that are low intensity, without accurate information, we do know from the Ministry of Defence that there is what they call a concerted effort to push the Ukrainians out of Ruddy. So definitely we do not know how much of this map is accurate, but we do know this is accurate because Russia said they've only gone into Pavlovsk. Now, let's see. Lyman's already in artillery range. There's not a lot of artillery strikes on Lyman, so I would suspect Lyman isn't where the troops are. It's just the buffer between given the distance, I would say more likely they are in the area behind Lyman, all through these green parts. That the real problem is the heavy artillery and rocket systems through this line. And, of course, the decision to flank it and go round is important, but you can't go completely around, and they have not been able to completely isolate or cut off. The war is definitely, what would you say, behind schedule, but it's not off the rails. So every time you hear about Ukraine winning, Zelenskyy hasn't said that. And the closest thing we have to Zelenskyy admitting he was panicking is agreeing with Trump. Yeah, it's time we stop this thing. But remember, what Zelenskyy says and Zelenskyy means are two different things. He wants Trump to escalate. Now, according to the TV channel, which is CNN, though, according to one source, which Trump is under the impression that Ukraine is actually seeking to escalate and prolong the conflict. Axios is reporting, citing sources, that Washington has no plans to provide Tomahawks, and according to Axios, Trump made it clear that his priority is diplomacy, and providing Tomahawks would undermine it. Well, Zelenskyy said that he was frank and asked Trump up front for a long list. As you know, Zelenskyy yesterday put out a press statement, a long list of things he intends to ask for. Today he claims he wants a ceasefire. That is obviously after being told by Trump, no, no, no. Then he's saying, okay, but this is a trap. Remember, he wants a ceasefire guaranteed by the United States, where Trump is telling Putin and Zelenskyy to stop the killing and make a deal, though Trump says both to claim some victory. Moscow said, yep, for it to work, Ukraine must withdraw from the parts of the regions that it controls. So both Zelenskyy and Russia right now are not being reasonable. Zelenskyy wants a ceasefire, but give me more weapons. And Putin is saying, stop giving them weapons. Don't let them into NATO. Don't let them into the return to neutrality. So both sides are still at that sticking point. Now, the obvious sensible thing to do is to freeze in place and accept an end. But I think this is the problem with the world when it comes to negotiating. People think they can always get more. And that's why society's breaking down, because somebody always wants more. You marry somebody and they just want more. They don't marry who you are. They marry what they think you will be. And that is the problem. It's like the dishonest person when they're caught. They're only upset that they got caught. Now, Russian forces, it's like wanting constant pay rises. You do know eventually you can't keep adding zeros to numbers, right? And expecting to afford more, right? There's no point in price rises if the economy isn't expanding. If there aren't more goods and services, you don't need more money. You're just being greedy. At some point, pay rises, prices have to come down, pay rises have to end. The economy has to stabilize, but it won't, because nobody wants to call the other guy and say, no, enough's enough. No more pay rises. No more. People can't afford housing because this mentality of constantly putting prices up. And we have a war in Ukraine that won't go away because people keep asking for more. And right now, you can't defend Putin's position at the same time while you criticize Zelenskyy's position, because if you boil it down to the most basic concepts, both are asking for more than what they currently have, okay? Ukraine is asking for Russia to withdraw, and Russia's saying, nah, you got to withdraw from these areas because they're now all ours. Now, Russians have allegedly taken another town. Oh, this is battle group Yug. We hardly hear from Yug. Again, this is one of the three battle groups in the Donetsk area. You have Tensa, Yug. Now I forgot the third one. I can't remember all their names. Dnipro at Zaporozhye, yeah. You have Yug on the flanks, and in the north you have Zapad, yeah, and Vostok, yeah. So, yeah, a smaller casualty list today, though overall over 1,000, which is not good, by any means. It has not reached 2,000 as I thought it would. So Russia has dialed back the intensity a little bit. Plus also both sides are relying more on drones. And so to that end, Russia is focusing more on blowing up Ukrainian drone sites. And again, this hasn't been reported today, but while Zelenskyy was talking with President Trump, I'm pretty sure this was deliberate. I saw somewhere that this took place in Zelenskyy's hometown. This was a key drone facility. Doesn't actually say where. I'm pretty sure there's no indication where it took place. Yeah. Times of India is the largest selling English daily in the world. They produce global news from New Delhi. They are actually English speakers. They're not Indian. Sorry, they are Indians, but I mean they speak English speakers. So, but for the sake of copyright. Alright, long range. Now, according to some sources, this was Zelensky's hometown, but it hasn't been confirmed. But, well, Zelenskyy traded drones for missiles because it is more of a missile than a drone. You know, the new... now, this is the new... what's it? Loyalty class UAV with several launchers. Okay, these go out on the back of trucks. Now, they've struck the initial facility and the explosion recorded in infrared. You saw how quick the missile came in. They first hit air defences, crippling the air defences. Big setback for the Ukrainian military. Obviously, the entire facility, as you can see, wiped out. The secondary explosions, fires. You can see the size of these. Basically, when the explosives for the drones went off. Now, according to this, some 5 launchers and 30 Ukrainians were killed. The Ukrainian servicemen were killed. Here it claims, Meritov is Kharkiv. So, don't know if this is Zelensky's hometown or not, or it's a different stories. Because, remember, sometimes they publish stories and they don't all align. That's why I said at the start. They don't always give the same location. Some will only give the major town name. Others get the numbers wrong. But one thing Ukrainian military has done is strike deep into Russia in recent months, and you can see drones hit a office building in the Russian financial district. This is targeting the Russian economy, as you can see. No, I'm not suggesting, but let's say in a hypothetical situation, you have a source inside the Ukrainian military, you're providing them with drones, and you also happen to run one of the third largest banks in the Western Hemisphere, because don't forget, none of the largest banks in the world are in Europe anymore. You have Russia, China, Japan, all have bigger banks than England. Well, let's say you're in England and you were once the richest bank in the world, and now you're not, and you're reeling from losing billions in a war, a petty economic trade war, and so here you have a chance to make some money and burn some Russians at the same time, and then take their assets. So you suggest some targets to Zelenskyy, and those offices blow up, and lo and behold, the bank could just dissolve those assets. Wouldn't you start to suspect that England is providing 85,000 drones for nefarious means? And even if they weren't, then shouldn't you consider them a party to the war because they are? If not, then fine. They should have no participation. But as reported time and time again, they do more than just provide the weapons. They assist in targeting. And again, power plant was targeted. No, we don't. Here's the thing, we don't know the damage, but we do know that Moscow retaliated on Ukraine after these attacks. And yet, time and time again, the Western media keeps talking about Russian aggression. It's Russian retaliation. And if Russia was being aggressive, I would call it out. And I don't have a track record with most of you, but those who know definitely know that during the Donbass war, at least, there was clear signs, right? Particularly that there was some strange, you actually saw propaganda films that had nothing to do with the war whatsoever. So there was definitely a lot of misinformation going on. So it is hard, particularly when I started doing this, to actually sort out what was disinformation. So I had to always go back to various sites. And eventually, there's just reaching the point where, why are half the stories wrong? And then it sort of realised that if the media tells a lie in every story, people are just going to tune out. But if the media in order to have some credibility, you need some stories that are pretty factual. But see, here's the thing that the left constantly do. They constantly bleat on about Fox News and its talking points. Now, Fox hardly covers the Ukraine war. Russia hardly covers the Ukraine war. Most of the Ukraine war is covered by The Guardian, which is full of misinformation as shown. And unfortunately, there was a time when The Guardian was calling out Ukraine for its Nazi problem. I shouldn't have said that. Ukraine has a problem with its internal politics. Everybody knows it. But at the beginning of the conflict, the number of Ukrainian losses was staggering. Again, and in 18 months, nearly 50,000, they say total number of Ukrainian troops and that killed. US figures put Ukrainians' losses at 300 to 400,000. Now, is there a draft in Russia? There's always been a draft. Okay, it's called active military service, but the troops going to Ukraine volunteers. And you can see even from the Kiev Independent, constant complaints that Ukraine is not meeting its call-up obligations, and because both sides, here's the thing that both sides can't afford this war, but for now, Russia can because of financial support from India and China. With China's buying of Russian gas and diesel suddenly coming to a stop, it looks like Xi Jinping deliberately retaliated. There's a quiet internal problem in BRICS, and Xi has made some heavy-handed mistakes with going after private gas and oil in China, cutting off Russian gas and oil to these private facilities, and then suddenly creating a huge trucking problem and a huge inflationary problem so all of a sudden, Russian gas and oil, all of a sudden diesel shoots through the roof in Russia because state enterprises are costly and inefficient But the truck drivers lose access to cheap Russian gas and diesel, so it's causing huge inflationary pressures in China. Xi doesn't understand the economy, okay? Every action doesn't create a reaction, it creates an economic ripple. And I'll give you an example. If Russian gas and oil goes from a 30% discount and widespread distribution to low spread distribution, it's not just truck drivers and their diesel. It's the cost of deliveries go up, which means the cost of the goods delivered goes up. And if the cost of the goods delivered goes up, you expect you're going to have wage claims, which causes general inflation. And then you have the major economic problem is that Xi is artificially pushing prices down on everything but imported goods to get you to stop buying imported goods. But because Russia's diesel production often relied on these 9 refineries, that a lot of the Russian diesel that made in state-owned facilities goes to the strategic stockpiles. This is why one person cannot control the entire economy, let alone one party, let alone one organization. To control the economy, you need a bureaucracy that just doesn't exist. But what Putin is banking on is the Russian strategic reserve. And, well, 2 things. 1, the Russian strategic reserve, and 2, countries don't really go bankrupt. America can't go bankrupt, right? It can always pay off its debts with strategic reserves if really, really, really hard pressed. China can pay its debts easy with its strategic reserves of rare earth minerals alone. So, really, China can get out of the hole it's in if it really wanted to. Japan, a bit difficult. They were banking on the world going with hydrogen, but America and China decided to screw Japan and go with lithium-ion batteries. Here's the problem. Hydrogen's better, we all know it, but because the commies in America there's people who really, really, really cannot think, okay? They fall in love with something, so they think that it's the best thing ever since sliced bread, and even if something better comes along, they won't like it or accept it, or they work against it. It's like DVDs and Blu-ray. Look at the resistance to Blu-ray. They went with DVDs. Now, it took a long time, but eventually Blu-ray came back and took over because it was the better product. And the same thing is going to happen with hydrogen fuel. Eventually, companies are going to come to realize that hydrogen fuel is better. For now, we just have to accept the fact that there are bad faith actors in every country right now who want to continue the Ukraine war because the Bank of England allegedly wants to see a ripple effect in the European economy that will lift the British economy because you'll see all the Russian oligarchs selling off assets cheap. This is what they hoped, collapse of, Germany will go down, so England will go up. Oh, France will go down. Yay! That's, in England, you tell them France is on fire, and they say, let's go rush some marshmallows. So, there's no love lost there. Still. So, you have to understand whatever motive that Keir Starmer says he has, and maybe you can say that about Trump. I honestly think Trump is motivated by peace, okay? He wants to see more business deals. He's a very open and transparent person, unlike Macron. Now, Carney, on the other hand, he thinks the world will turn against Trump, so he's been betting against Trump at every turn, thinking the world is going to turn against Trump any minute now. But Carney got a huge shock when the world didn't turn against Trump, and even Xi is signalling that China may relax on their rare earths. And again, one of the reasons behind the Ukraine war was allegedly rare earth minerals. But here's the thing, they're not rare as in they're rare to find. I don't know why they're called rare earths. I think it was... It's a term. Oh, because they were metal oxides and they couldn't be processed, so they were rare to be found in concentrations enough to be economically mined. Oh yeah, so it came from the fact that they were rare in the 18th century, though later they were, because they contained lots of non-metallic heat-resistant substance. They thought So it was rare to find rare earth minerals as metals. Right. Which is fair enough because they're highly reactive. But they superconduct and semiconduct, and under some circumstances they can do both, usually as highly magnetized alloys. And why is highly magnetized alloys so important? Well, all your broadcast equipment, all your radio, still is the technology of cathodes and diodes and anodes and resistors and capacitors, lithium-ion batteries. They all rely, semiconductors, basically all your chips, every chip has some form of rare earth in metallic form mixed with gold and copper in them. Okay? Now, but see, in reality, Russia has these minerals. It doesn't need to invade Ukraine for them. Maybe, yes, they are doing it to choke off Europe from rare earth materials. Too bad, so sad. You had the opportunity to make peace. And if Trump had been president, it would have. But this is the problem with liberalism. It always has to be their way, and they are willing to lose wars in order to harm you so that they, in the long term, can constantly point and say, well, you didn't support us then, and look what happened. Yeah, but most people don't stop and say, yeah, but you undermined us every step of the way. But this is what's happening with the government shutdown. They're saying, wow, the Democrats won't even vote for a clean bill to fund the government for another 7 weeks until, because it would mean if we return to regular budget schedule, no, the Democrats don't want a clean bill. They want a bill with renewed funding for all the programs from under Biden. Biden's no longer president, but they want Trump to fund their pet projects, which includes Ukraine. So, until you understand the fact of politics is that people lie and governments do not care if people die, and that's why they don't like Trump, because that might be one of the few people in the world right now who seems to care about Ukrainians dying. Because let me ask you this, have you ever seen a Liberal shed a tear over the 300,000 or 500,000 Ukrainians who died in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018? You know how many Ukrainians have died? Over 100,000 a year have died since 2014. Over 100,000 Ukrainian civilians have died due to murder, malnutrition, and disease, drug use, alcoholism. Okay, it has one of the highest death rates in the world. For most of the deaths, civilian casualties, probably even today, civilian casualties are nothing to do with the war. Just how shitty Ukraine is. They don't give a damn, folks. I think these peace negotiations should be front and center and transparent. I wish they were. And I wish there was a pretty much a vote. And I pretty much, you see, a lot of people are not going to vote for a country if they knew the truth about Ukraine. But until we have that ability to get the truth out there, and for that we need your help. What will it take for you to like, share, and subscribe? What will it take to support the channel? I've given you options. Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Please and thank you. See you in the next video. I really, look, honestly, if there was just a once-off subscription fee, but YouTube won't do it, it would be so much easier if YouTube listened in the beginning to people's needs. It'd be so much easier if there's better competition out there. But things are what they are. Okay? So please, I need your help. Advertising will not make you a living. Okay? Do you know how many people now you need to... You know how many people you need now to make a living? 1 million subscribers. And the vast majority just don't have that. Or will ever get that. So, thank you. See you in the next video. Bye for now.